Witness Windolph's astonishing narrative of Custer's last stand. Charles Windhoff, a soldier in the United States Army, participated in the Battle of Little Bighorn as a private in Company L of the 7th Cavalry Regiment. Windhoff emerged as one of the few survivors. A German immigrant, he enlisted in the Army in 1872 and served for 5 years, receiving the Medal of Honor for his valor during the battle. His detailed and accurate account of the conflict has made him a prominent figure in American history. Before we proceed, please remember to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. On that fateful Sunday, June 25th around noon, we crossed the divide between the Rosebud and the Little Bighorn. Our regiment was in a column of march, heading west. The troopers from each company rode 4 abreast, maintaining a distance of 50 to 60 feet between companies. Abruptly, we came to a halt, and Lieutenant Cook directed Bentine to take his Company H, along with Company D under Captain Weir and Company K under Lieutenant Godfrey, to scout the hills and confront any hostiles they might encounter. General Custer retained Companies Y, F, E, C, and L, while Major Reno commanded Companies M, A, and C, G, accompanied by most of the Indian scouts under Lieutenants Varnum and Hare. Our 7th Cavalry, comprising 600 men, was segmented into detachments, pursuing Indian forces across challenging terrain. We were aware that a significant force of hostiles lay 12 to 15 miles to the west, but the precise number was unclear. Our Indian scouts estimated several thousand hostiles, while Custer and most officers anticipated facing between 1,000 to 2,000 warriors, likely inadequately armed. They expected a rearguard action that would allow the Indians to escape. Contrary to expectations, we confronted a force that potentially doubled that number, outnumbering Custer's 600 men by a ratio of 5 to 1. Custer had intended to launch a surprise dawn attack on June 26th, but opted to strike immediately when hostile scouts detected his column. Bentine, leading 3 troops, advanced ahead to scout. We navigated through rough terrain, which posed significant challenges for the horses. From each successive hilltop, Lieutenant Gibson signaled back that he observed no indications of Indians. Even the troopers in the ranks believed we were on a pointless mission. After 2 hours, we retraced our steps onto Custer's trail, relieved to return to the small valley. We proceeded west along a minor stream where the lead pack mules became ensnared in a quagmire, emphasizing the slow pace of the pack train. As we departed, we heard distant gunfire ahead. Captain Weir led his company, with Bentine positioned in front of him. We all understood that we would soon be engaged in combat. Shortly after leaving the swamp, we passed a burning teepee, likely ignited by our Indian scouts. The horses sensed danger, becoming restless. Around this time, we spotted Sergeant Knipe of Tom Custer's C Troop, delivering an order for Captain McDougal to expedite the arrival of the pack mules. Bentine instructed him to return down the trail. We then noticed trumpeter Martini, wounded yet delivering a message from Custer to Bentine to bring the pack swiftly. Martini, a spirited little Italian who had served as a drummer boy with Garibaldi in the struggle for Italian independence, was known to me as he belonged to H Troop. We used to tease him in a friendly manner, but we never did so again after this battle. He demonstrated himself to be a true man of courage. His horse was bleeding heavily from a bullet wound in its right hip, yet Martini remained unaware of it. Bentine commanded him to rejoin his company. I have always speculated that Bentine deemed it unnecessary to send further word to Captain McDougal, as Sergeant Knipe had already relayed the message to bring the pack train with all urgency. Regardless, Martini's horse was fatigued, and he struggled to keep pace with us. The sound of intense gunfire intensified, and soon we encountered several Crow or Re-scouts driving a few Indian ponies. They shouted soldiers and gestured towards the bluffs rising to the north. We were aware that we were approaching the valley of the Little Bighorn, where fierce fighting was taking place nearby. Bentine commanded us to draw our pistols, and we charged up the bluffs at a gallop, expecting an imminent confrontation with hostiles. Upon reaching the crest of the first series of rolling hills, the river valley suddenly revealed itself to our left. The sight that met our eyes was sufficient to instill fear in the hearts of even the most courageous men. Below us, perhaps 150 feet or more down in the valley and about half a mile away, figures on horseback were racing wildly, with gunfire echoing in every direction. Further down the river, we discerned large groups of mounted men whom we suspected to be Native Americans. We were riding at a rapid pace ourselves and had scarcely caught a glimpse of this tragic battlefield when we noticed both mounted and dismounted soldiers on a knoll to the north. We rode swiftly towards them, our hearts racing with anticipation. I will pause here to recount the fate of our comrades with Reno. Recall that around 12:15 p.m., Reno was assigned command of 3 troops, 17 Crow and Ree scouts, along with 3 White scouts. Custer, leading 5 troops, advanced in column to the right, while Reno's column moved to the left. Bentine, with 3 troops, was directed to scout the rugged hills to the south and west, and I, being with Bentine, did not witness the events that transpired over the next 5 hours. However, I have heard the account so often that I will attempt to convey it in the simplest way possible. Please be aware that I was not present and am recounting the stories shared by survivors. As the 2 battalions descended into the dry creek bottom, they would occasionally come within 50 yards of each other, and at other times be as far as 200 yards apart. Both columns trotted westward towards the Little Bighorn. Around 2 p.m., they encountered a burning teepee containing the body of an Indian warrior who had been killed in General Crook's battle with the Indians just a week earlier, less than 20 miles away. One of the White scouts in the front called back to Custer, indicating that hostiles were in proximity, while remaining out of rifle range. Custer then gestured to Major Reno to cross the creek and directed Adjutant Cook to instruct Reno to advance the Little Bighorn 2 miles further west, subsequently charging the Indian village to the right, with the understanding that the entire force would offer support. This final statement has been a contentious issue debated by many concerning the tragic events that were about to transpire. Reno led his contingent of 120 men, accompanied by a few guides and scouts at a brisk pace, crossing the Little Bighorn Ford and stopping only to hydrate their horses and reorganize in troop formation on the western bank of the river. The western side of the river showcased a relatively flat valley, measuring approximately half a mile to a mile in width, leading to a low plateau in the west. On the opposite bank of the Little Bighorn, the Wolf Mountains ascended steeply, with coulees descending from the bluffs to the river bottom at various locations. The river, measuring roughly 100 to 150 feet in width, flowed clear and cold over a gravelly bed. For nearly 3 miles along the western bank, Indian camps were established, with each of the 5 Sioux tribes, Cheyennes, Blackfeet, and Arapahoes, occupying distinct circles spaced about a quarter-mile apart. To the west, extensive pony herds grazed, overseen by Indian boys and squaws. It is estimated that around 10,000 Indians, roughly 1/3 of all Sioux tribesmen, were present, including between 2,000 and 3,000 warriors. This is an appropriate moment to clarify a prevalent misconception regarding the weaponry of the hostiles. Contrary to widespread belief, not all warriors were armed with modern repeating Winchester rifles and sufficient ammunition. In my assessment, half of the warriors were equipped solely with bows, arrows, and lances, while half of the remainder utilized various old muzzle loaders, single-shot rifles, and miscellaneous items. Only about 25 to 30% of the warriors had access to modern repeating rifles. Another significant detail: young Indian males aged 14 and older accompanied the warriors and took an active role in the battle, particularly during its later phases. The soldiers were equipped with single-shot Springfield carbines ranging from 45 to 70 caliber, a firearm celebrated for its precision and lethality at distances up to 600 yards. However, when fired in quick succession, the breech would become fouled, and the greasy cartridges frequently jammed, making extraction by the extractor impossible. This situation required the use of a hunting knife to forcibly remove the spent shell, a process that resulted in the deaths of many troopers on that tragic Sunday. Each soldier was also armed with a 6-shot single-action Colt Army revolver, the most recent model available. The troops had been instructed to carry 100 rounds of rifle ammunition and 24 rounds of revolver ammunition, either on their person or stored in their saddlebags. As the troopers dismounted and every 4th man took on the role of horseholder, many of the horses were stampeded, leading to the loss of thousands of rounds of essential ammunition, particularly for Custer's men. Returning to Reno's battalion, after crossing the river, they arranged themselves in columns of 4s with the Indian scouts positioned on their left. Soon Indian horsemen were observed riding frantically back and forth in the valley, and the southern end of the Indian camps became visible. Reno then deployed his 3 troops and scouts in a skirmish line, spanning the entire width of the narrow valley. Troop M was stationed on the right, A in the center, and G on the left, with the scouts positioned to their left front. Major Reno dismounted his men, establishing a skirmish line with 75 yards separating each soldier. After advancing half a mile toward the Indian camp, they encountered a significant number of mounted Indians who charged towards them. For 10 minutes, Reno's men maintained their position, firing consistently, but were soon surrounded by hundreds of mounted Indians, many armed with repeating rifles. Recognizing the peril of being encircled, Reno commanded his men to retreat, organizing them efficiently and withdrawing 300 yards. No sooner had this been achieved than hundreds of mounted Indians surged towards them once more. Reno arranged his troops in a skirmish line and dismounted again, firing consistently. For a duration of 10 minutes, they maintained their position, but the Indians progressively closed in from all directions, firing at close range and causing significant casualties. Fearing total encirclement, Reno instructed his men to fall back to a grove of cottonwoods, located half a mile to the rear. Regrettably, amidst the chaos, numerous troopers became detached from their units. The horses panicked, and the men fled in a state of wild disorder. It was at this point that the highest number of casualties occurred. Many troopers were shot from their mounts, killed instantly, or brutally butchered and scalped. The survivors crossed the river in a state of confusion, climbing a steep hill on the east bank, closely pursued by hundreds of mounted Indians. Approximately 15 to 20 soldiers lost their lives in the river and along the riverbank. Once Reno's men reached the summit of the hill, the Indians withdrew. At this crucial moment, around 2:30 p.m., Captain Weir arrived with his D Troop, closely followed by Bentine's troops H and K. Although Reno's forces were in disarray, the arrival of reinforcements brought some semblance of order. Bentine quickly evaluated the situation and directed his men to assume defensive positions. Shortly thereafter, they were joined by Captain McDougall's Troop B and the pack train, which delivered much-needed ammunition and supplies. The combined forces entrenched themselves on the hill, preparing for a desperate defense. Meanwhile, Custer had moved down the river with his 5 troops, attempting to flank the Indian village. As they rode north along the bluffs, they encountered the main body of the hostiles. At the northern end of the valley, close to the current location of the Custer National Cemetery, the full extent of the Indian forces became evident. Custer's troops were quickly overwhelmed by the overwhelming number of warriors. In spite of their courageous attempts, they found themselves surrounded and cut down, fighting until the very last man. As night descended, Reno and Bentine's forces positioned on the hill could hear the distant sounds of combat, realizing the grim fate that had likely befallen their fellow soldiers. The night was spent in tense anticipation, with sporadic skirmishes as the Indians probed their defenses. By dawn, the Indians began to retreat, having secured a decisive victory. The remnants of Reno and Bentine's battalions were ultimately rescued by General Terry's column, which arrived 2 days later. The Battle of Little Bighorn remains a significant and tragic chapter in American history. The courage and tenacity of soldiers like Charles Windhoff, who survived to recount their experiences, provide a poignant insight into the harsh realities of frontier warfare. This narrative offers a comprehensive and vivid account of one of the most renowned battles in the Great Sioux War of 1876. Stay tuned for more first-hand narratives of various battles. Have a wonderful day, and see you next time.